The crimson dust storms of Kepler 742 howled outside the research station's reinforced windows, painting the sky in shades of rust and blood. Dr. Kira Patel stood at her observation post, scanning the barren landscape through specialized equipment designed to penetrate the perpetual storms. 3 years into her xenobiology research mission, she had documented countless minor life forms, but nothing that justified the massive investment in this remote outpost. Until today. The readings on her scanner pulsed with an unprecedented energy signature. Something large was out there, something that shouldn't exist in this hostile environment. Kira's hands trembled as she adjusted the scanning frequency, trying to get a clearer reading through the storm. "Dr. Patel, you're needed in the lab." The station's A chirped through the intercom. "Not now," she muttered, eyes fixed on the readout. The signature was moving, but erratically. Whatever it was injured. Kira grabbed her emergency kit and headed for the airlock. Station protocol strictly prohibited unauthorized excursions during storms, but she couldn't ignore this. As she sealed her environmental suit, she recorded a quick log entry, following up on anomalous life sign readings. Category 4 entity, possibly wounded. Emergency protocols in effect. The moment she stepped outside, the storm assaulted her suit with stinging particles of red dust. Visibility was barely 10 meters, but her tracker led her forward with unwavering precision. After 15 minutes of careful navigation through the rocky terrain, she heard it. A low, resonating sound that cut through the howling wind. The creature lay partially sheltered beneath an overhanging rock formation. Kira's breath caught in her throat. It was massive, easily 3 meters long, with a sleek, armored body that seemed to absorb the light. Its form resembled Earth's extinct dire wolves, but covered in overlapping plates that shifted color like oil on water. 6 eyes, arranged in a precise geometric pattern, fixed on her with alarming intelligence. But it was the wound that demanded her attention. A deep gash ran along its side, exposing flesh that pulsed with bioluminescent fluids. The injury pattern wasn't natural. This was a weapon wound. The creature made no move to attack as she approached, though its eyes tracked her every movement. Instead, it emitted another low sound, somewhere between a growl and a hum, that seemed to resonate with her suit's systems. "You're not what anyone expected to find here, are you?" Kira spoke softly, knowing the creature couldn't understand her words, but hoping her tone would convey her intent. She opened her medical kit, displaying the contents slowly. "I can help, if you'll let me." The creature's eyes flickered in a pattern, and it shifted slightly, exposing more of its wound. Whether this was trust or desperate necessity, Kira couldn't tell. But as she began applying emergency sealant to the injury, she noticed something else. Mechanical components integrated with the creature's biology. This wasn't just an alien animal, it was bioengineered. As she worked, her mind raced with implications. The station's primary mission was to assess the planet for potential colonization. The discovery of an engineered apex predator would shut down the entire project. Protocol demanded she report it immediately. The creature's largest eyes fixed on her face through her helmet visor, and something passed between them. A moment of understanding that transcended species. This being wasn't just surviving, it was hiding. Kira's hands stilled over her communicator. "You're running from something, aren't you?" The creature's plated skin rippled in response, and it produced a series of complex tones that made her suit's sensors fluctuate wildly. She'd had spent years studying alien life forms, but never had she encountered anything that displayed such clear signs of advanced intelligence and technological integration. The storm was intensifying. She needed to make a decision quickly. Leave the creature here, report her findings, and let whatever fate awaited it unfold. Or risk everything she had worked for to help a being she didn't understand. The answer came as the creature struggled to stand, its wounded side trembling with the effort. It took a single step toward her, and then collapsed, its armored plates dulling to a matte grey. Without immediate medical attention, it would die. Kira accessed her suit's emergency beacon. "This is Dr. Petal. I need immediate assistance at my location. I found a subject for study. Prepare Containment Unit 3 and full medical protocols." She paused, knowing her next words would change everything. "And keep this off the official channels for now." As the storm raged around them, Kira placed a protective field generator near the creature, creating a small haven from the cutting winds. She sat down beside it, watching its breathing stabilize under the emergency treatment. "I don't know what you are or where you came from," she whispered, "but I'm going to help you. We'll figure this out together." The creature's eyes dimmed slightly, and it made a soft sound that seemed to harmonize with her suit's power systems. As they waited for the rescue team, Kira realized she had crossed a line from which there was no return. Her choice to help this being would either prove to be the greatest discovery in human history or the mistake that ended her career. But looking at the magnificent creature beside her, somehow she knew this was exactly where she needed to be. The converted storage bay hummed with medical equipment as Kira studied the readouts on her tablet. 3 days had passed since she brought the creature into the research station, and its recovery defied every prediction. The wound that should have taken weeks to heal was already closing, the bioluminescent tissue knitting itself back together with impossible precision. "Your latest scans are quite interesting, Dr. Petal," said Director Harrison, his holographic form flickering in the corner of the bay. "But I'm more concerned about the decision to keep this discovery off official channels." Kira kept her eyes on her work. "The creature's biological systems are unlike anything we've encountered. I wanted to gather more data before risking corporate interference." "Corporate interference?" Harrison's tone sharpened. "May I remind you that Frontier Biotech funds this entire operation?" The creature stirred, its plated armor shifting from deep purple to a rippling blue. All 6 eyes opened, focusing on Harrison's hologram with unnerving intensity. A low-frequency hum emanated from its body, causing the medical equipment to flicker. "Fascinating defensive response," Kira noted, deliberately changing the subject. "It appears to generate electromagnetic interference when it perceives a threat." Harrison's image distorted. "A threat? Dr. Petal, need I remind you that keeping a potentially dangerous life form?" The creature rose to its full height, its armored plates extending to make it appear even larger. The hum intensified, and Harrison's hologram dissolved completely. "Well, that's one way to end a conversation," Kira muttered, approaching the creature. It immediately relaxed its defensive posture, its plates settling back into a smooth configuration. "But you're not making this any easier." The being responded by extending one of its armored limbs toward her, revealing the complex mechanisms hidden beneath the plates. Kira had spent countless hours studying these components, a perfect fusion of biological and technological systems that shouldn't have been possible. "Security Chief Anders is requesting entry," the station's A announced. Kira sighed. "Granted." Anders strode in, his tall frame tense with barely contained agitation. "Doctor, we need to talk about our guest." He cast a wary glance at the creature, which had begun emanating a different frequency, one that made the hair on Kira's arms stand up. "Chief Anders, I've submitted detailed reports." "Reports that raise more questions than they answer," he interrupted. This thing is clearly engineered for combat. Look at those defensive systems, the integrated weapons capabilities. Theoretical capabilities. Kira corrected. It hasn't shown any aggressive behavior. The creature moved closer to Kira, its plated body flowing with surprising grace. Anders instinctively reached for his sidearm, but stopped as the being produced a series of complex tones that resonated through the room. Kira's tablet suddenly lit up with streaming data. This is incredible. It's not just making sound, it's transmitting data. Complex mathematical sequences, astronomical coordinates. She looked up at the creature in amazement. You've been trying to communicate all along, haven't you? The being's plates rippled in what Kira had come to recognize as affirmation. Its 6 eyes adjusted their configuration, forming new geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with meaning. Anders frowned. Doctor, if this thing is truly sentient and technologically advanced, that makes it an even greater security risk. We have no idea of its intentions or origins. Exactly, Kira replied, her excitement building. Think about what we could learn. This being could revolutionize our understanding of bioengineering, interspecies communication. Or it could be an advanced scout for something worse. Anders cut in. I'm implementing full containment protocols, effective immediately. No more private sessions. All interaction will be monitored and recorded. The creature's armor shifted to a deep, pulsing red. The hum it produced changed frequency, becoming almost subsonic. Equipment throughout the bay began to malfunction, screens flickering with random data. Stop. Kira stepped between Anders and the creature. You're only proving that it responds to hostility with defensive measures. Let me continue my work. I'm making progress in understanding its communication methods. Anders studied her for a long moment. You have 48 hours to prove this thing isn't a threat, Doctor. After that, I'm calling in a corporate containment team. He turned and left, the door sealing behind him with an ominous hiss. Kira turned to the creature, which had moved to a corner of the bay, its armored plates now a dull, muted grey. I won't let them hurt you, she promised. But you need to help me understand. What are you? Where did you come from? The being's eyes realigned, and it began producing a new series of tones. Kira's tablet filled with streaming data, star charts, mathematical formulas, and something else, images. They showed glimpses of a civilization far beyond human achievement, where biological and technological evolution had merged into something extraordinary. But there was something else in the data, something that made Kira's blood run cold. Hidden among the star charts were warning signals, repeating patterns that spoke of pursuit, of danger approaching. Whatever this creature was, wherever it had come from, it hadn't ended up on Kepler 742 by accident. It was running from something, and Kira had a sinking feeling that its pursuers weren't far behind. She looked at her tablet, then at the creature. 48 hours, she whispered. We have 48 hours to figure this out before everything falls apart. The being's plates shifted to a color she'd never seen before, a shade that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously. All 6 eyes fixed on her with an intensity that conveyed more than any data stream could. Trust, urgency, and something that felt remarkably like hope. Dawn broke over Kepler 742 in shades of crimson and gold, but Kira had no time to admire the view. She rushed through the station's corridors, her tablet clutched tightly against her chest. The data she'd decoded during the night changed everything. The creature, which she now knew called itself a Nexus Guardian, had shared fragments of its history through complex mathematical patterns. It was part of an ancient defense network, created by a civilization that had vanished eons ago. But something had awakened the network, something that now hunted its guardians across the galaxy. A distant rumbling shook the station. Kira quickened her pace. Unidentified vessels approaching, the Station A announced. 3 ships entering orbit. Configuration unknown. Kira burst into the medical bay where the Guardian waited. Its armor had shifted to deep obsidian, all 6 eyes focused on the ceiling. It knew. Somehow, it had sensed them coming. "We need to move," Kira said, already disconnecting the monitoring equipment. The corporate team Anders called. It's not corporate at all, is it? The Guardian's response came as a series of rapid data bursts at our tablet. Images flashed across the screen. Sleek ships of impossible design, hunters wearing biomechanical suits, weapons that could tear apart space itself. Another tremor rocked the station, stronger this time. "Dr. Patel." Anders' voice crackled over the intercom. "Report to the command center immediately. Our visitors are insistent about taking custody of your subject." The Guardian rose to its full height, armor plates extending and reconfiguring. In the dim light of the bay, Kira saw new patterns emerging on its surface, defensive systems activating, weapons charging. "No," she said firmly, placing a hand on its armored flank. "We can't fight them here. Too many innocent people could get hurt." The being's eyes shifted, forming a pattern she recognized as acknowledgement. Its weapons powered down, but the tension in its form remained. "Station breach detected," the AI announced. Unknown entities entering through docking bay 2. Kira's mind raced. The station had been built with multiple escape routes, a necessity on a planet prone to deadly storms. "There's a maintenance tunnel that leads to the emergency vehicles," she said, pulling up the station schematics. "If we can." The bay door slid open. Anders stood there, his face grim. "Doctor, step away from it." "Chief Anders, you don't understand what's happening. These aren't corporate representatives." "I know exactly what they are," he interrupted, his voice strangely flat. He raised his arm, and Kira saw that his skin had taken on a metallic sheen. "They've been looking for this one for a very long time." The Guardian moved with impossible speed, placing itself between Kira and Anders. Its armor rippled with waves of energy, and the air itself seemed to distort around them. Anders, or whatever he had become, smiled. His form began to shift, metal and synthetic tissue replacing human features. "The age of organic life is ending, Doctor. The Nexus Guardians were created to prevent that future, but they failed." The Guardian's response was a pulse of energy that shattered every screen in the bay. Anders staggered back, his transformed body crackling with interference. "Run!" Kira grabbed her emergency pack and sprinted for the maintenance access panel, the Guardian flowing beside her like living mercury. Behind them, Anders' inhuman scream echoed through the station. They raced through narrow maintenance tunnels, the Guardian somehow compressing its massive form to fit. Kira's tablet flashed with warnings as more intruders breached the station. Whatever was hunting the Guardian had infiltrated human society far more deeply than anyone suspected. Emergency vehicle bay, Kira gasped as they reached a heavy security door. She slammed her hand on the biometric scanner, praying the systems were still functioning. The door slid open to reveal the station's small fleet of storm-ready vehicles. But they weren't alone. 3 figures waited there, their bodies a terrifying fusion of organic and synthetic components. Their forms shifted constantly, as if unable to decide on a single shape. Behind them stood a larger being that made Kira's mind recoil, a tower of writhing metal and flesh that pulsed with sickly light. The last Guardian, the central figure, spoke, its voice a chorus of mechanical tones. "Surrender, and we will make your extinction painless." The Guardian's response was to interpose itself between Kira and the hunters, its armor now glowing with internal light. But Kira could sense its fatigue. The wound from before hadn't fully healed, and they were outnumbered. She looked at her tablet, at the station schematics, and made a decision. "You want extinction," she called out, reaching for the emergency controls. "Try surviving a Kepler storm first." Before the hunters could react, Kira slammed her hand down on the bay door override. Klaxons blared as the massive doors began to open, exposing the bay to Kepler 742's lethal atmosphere. The storm outside roared in, bringing with it clouds of corrosive red dust. The hunters' forms began to degrade as the dust ate away at their synthetic components. The Guardian's armor, however, seemed to absorb the storm's fury, growing stronger. The crawler. Kira shouted over the howling wind, pointing to the largest of the emergency vehicles. "It's shielded for the worst storms." They fought their way through the maelstrom, the Guardian using its body to shield Kira from the worst of the storm. Behind them, the hunters were dissolving, their screams lost in the wind. The tower of flesh and metal toppled, its components scattering like leaves in a hurricane. Kira practically fell into the crawler's cockpit, the Guardian flowing in behind her like liquid metal. As the vehicle's shields activated, she could see the bay dissolving around them, torn apart by the storm's fury. "Hold on," she said, engaging the crawler's engines. The massive vehicle lurched forward, its treads finding purchase on the disintegrating floor. They burst out of the bay and into the storm, leaving the station, and its hunters behind. But as they drove into the crimson maelstrom, Kira knew this was just the beginning. The hunters would return, and next time they'd be ready for Kepler's storms. She glanced at the Guardian, its armor now pulsing with patterns she was beginning to understand. They needed answers, and there was only one place to find them: in the ancient ruins that lay hidden beneath Kepler 742's surface, where the Guardian's creators had left their last messages to the universe. The crawler's engines groaned as Kira guided it down another steep incline. They had been traveling for 6 hours through a network of underground canyons, following coordinates the Guardian had transmitted to her systems. The deeper they went, the more artificial their surroundings became, smooth-cut tunnels replacing natural formations, strange glyphs appearing on the walls. "These are the same symbols from your data transmissions," Kira noted, examining the markings through the crawler's external cameras. The Guardian, its form filling most of the vehicle's cargo space, emitted a series of harmonious tones. Her tablet translated them into a stream of images, a vast civilization spreading across the stars, merging with their technology not out of desire for power, but in search of understanding. But something had gone wrong. The images became darker, showing worlds consumed by a corruption that turned both organic and synthetic life into twisted abominations. The hunters weren't just pursuing the Guardian. They were spreading a virus that transformed everything it touched into extensions of their collective. A sudden impact rocked the crawler. Warning lights flashed across the console. Multiple contacts detected. The vehicle's A reported. Approaching from rear tunnels. Kira checked the rear cameras. Shadow-like forms moved through the darkness, their bodies flowing like oil, but glinting with metallic components. The hunters had found them. "How much further?" she asked, pushing the crawler's engines to their limit. The Guardian's response was immediate, a burst of data showing a massive chamber less than a kilometer ahead. The tunnel walls shook as something massive began moving through the rock itself. Tendrils of metallic corruption spread across the ancient glyphs, trying to reach the crawler. "Whatever you're planning to show me," Kira said through gritted teeth, "I hope it's worth all this." They burst through an ornate archway into a vast spherical chamber. Pillars of light rose from the floor to the distant ceiling, illuminating rows of crystalline structures that pulse with internal energy. At the chamber's center stood a platform covered in complex mechanisms that seemed to shift and flow like living things. The Guardian suddenly moved, its armor splitting apart and reconfiguring. Before Kira could react, it had wrapped itself around the crawler's exterior, forming an additional layer of protection. "What are you?" The chamber's entrance exploded inward. The twisted form of Anders emerged first, now barely recognizable as humanoid. Behind him came the other hunters, their bodies having adapted to survive Kepler's storms. And towering over them all was a new horror, a living mountain of corrupted flesh and machinery that pulsed with sickly green light. "The last sanctuary," Anders' voice echoed, distorted beyond recognition. "You've led us right to it. Now the transformation can begin." The Guardian's response vibrated through the crawler's hull, not a message of fear, but of triumph. The crystalline structures around the chamber began to pulse more rapidly, their light synchronizing with the Guardian's own rhythms. Kira's tablet suddenly blazed with new data. The Guardian wasn't just a defender, it was a key, designed to activate the chamber's true purpose. The entire planet was a vault, protecting something its creators had hidden from the very force that now pursued them. "The corruption ends here," Kira announced, understanding flooding through her. She engaged the crawler's external systems, allowing the Guardian to interface directly with the vehicle. Together, they moved toward the central platform. The hunters surged forward, but the chamber itself seemed to respond to the Guardian's presence. Beams of energy lanced from the pillars, holding the corrupted beings at bay. The crystalline structures resonated with increasing power, filling the air with harmonics that made Kira's bones vibrate. "You cannot stop evolution." The massive corrupted entity roared, its voice shaking dust from the ancient ceiling. "This isn't evolution," Kira replied, watching as the Guardian's energy merged with the chamber's systems. "It's extinction, and they knew you were coming." The platform beneath them began to rise, revealing previously hidden mechanisms. The Guardian's form flowed like quicksilver, connecting with ancient interfaces that had waited eons for this moment. Each connection sent new data flooding into Kira's systems, not just information, but a key to understanding the very nature of organic and synthetic life. The hunters tried to breach the energy barrier, their corrupted forms stretching and twisting. But with each attempt, the chamber's defenses grew stronger, drawing power from the Guardian's presence. They didn't just build weapons, Kira realized, reading the streaming data. They found a cure, a way to separate synthetic and organic life without destroying either. That's what you've been protecting all this time. The Guardian's affirmative response resonated through her entire being. The chamber's power reached a crescendo, and pure white light began to pour from the crystalline structures. Where it touched the hunters, their corrupted forms began to separate, synthetic components falling away like autumn leaves, leaving pure organic matter behind. Anders collapsed, his human form emerging from the metallic shell that had consumed him. All around the chamber, the hunters were transforming back, their true forms revealed. Even the massive corrupted entity began to dissolve, its components breaking down into their original elements. But the Guardian wasn't finished. As Kira watched in awe, it initiated the chamber's final sequence. The cure wasn't just for this room or this planet. It was broadcasting outward, carried on waves of energy that would ripple across the galaxy. "You knew," she whispered, understanding at last. "You let them chase you here, because this was the only place it could end." The Guardian's response was gentle, almost sad. Its form began to shine with internal light as it maintained the connection, ensuring the cure would spread to every infected world. As the chamber filled with pure radiance, Kira realized she was witnessing not just an end, but a beginning. The Guardian had fulfilled its purpose, but in doing so, it had given both organic and synthetic life a chance to evolve separately, each finding its own path forward. The light faded gradually, leaving the chamber transformed. Where corruption had spread, now clean metal and living tissue lay separately, each pure in its own way. The hunters, those who had survived, were human again, looking around in confusion and wonder. And the Guardian? Its armor had transformed, becoming something new, neither purely organic nor synthetic, but a perfect balance between the two. It turned its 6 eyes toward Kira, and for the first time, she heard its voice not as data or harmonics, but as clear thought. "Thank you for trusting in what you did not understand. The future is now free to find its own way." 3 months after the events in the ancient chamber, Kepler 742's research station had been transformed. Where once stood a simple outpost, now rose a complex of buildings dedicated to studying the intersection of organic and synthetic life. Scientists from across human space had gathered to learn from what the Guardian had revealed. Kira stood at her familiar observation window, but this time she wasn't alone. The Guardian sat beside her, its armor shimmering with colors that matched the sunset. Its form had stabilized into something that seemed to bridge worlds, organic grace combined with technological precision. "The latest reports from Earth are promising," she said, reviewing her tablet. "The cure's effects have reached every corner of human space. All traces of the corruption have been eliminated." She paused, looking at the being that had changed everything. "But you knew that would happen, didn't you?" The Guardian's response came not in data bursts now, but in clear thoughts that resonated directly with her mind, a gift of their shared experience in the chamber. "My creators saw many possible futures," it communicated. "This was the one they hoped for, but it required something they couldn't predict, a bridge between species who could trust beyond understanding." Below them, in the station's new research center, Anders was leading a team studying the separated synthetic components. His experience as both victim and survivor of the corruption had given him unique insights. The technology, freed from its corrupted state, held possibilities for advancing human civilization without risking organic life. "Director Harrison's replacement arrives tomorrow," Kira mentioned. "The Interstellar Science Council is very interested in what we're learning here." The Guardian's armor rippled with what she now recognized as amusement. "They seek knowledge, but they must also learn patience. Some discoveries cannot be rushed." Alert chimed on Kira's tablet. Another signal had been detected, similar to the one that had first led her to the Guardian. But this one came from deep space, beyond the edge of mapped territory. "There are more of you out there, aren't there?" Other Guardians, protecting other secrets. The being's 6 eyes arranged themselves in a pattern she'd come to associate with profound meaning. "The universe holds many treasures and many dangers. My kind were created to maintain balance until those ready to understand could find us." Kira thought about the vastness of space, about all the mysteries still waiting to be discovered. "Will you leave, now that your mission here is complete?" The Guardian turned its gaze to the horizon, where the first stars were becoming visible. "My mission has evolved, as have I. The Ancient Ones knew that defeating the corruption was only the beginning. Now comes the greater challenge. guiding two forms of life as they learn to grow separately but in harmony. And you think humanity is ready for that challenge? You were ready, the Guardian responded, its mental voice warm with affection. You faced the unknown with compassion instead of fear. That is why my creators left their legacy. Not for those who sought power, but for those who sought understanding. A new alert lit up Kira's screen. More signals, coming from different directions. The Guardian's success had triggered something, awakening ancient beacons across the galaxy. They're calling to us, Kira realized, offering us a chance to learn. Yes, the Guardian confirmed. But this time we go together, not as protector and protected, but as equals. There are wonders waiting that neither of us could discover alone. Kira looked out at the darkening sky, where distant stars beckoned with new promise. The Guardian's presence beside her felt right, as if they had both been shaped by fate to reach this moment. Well then, she said, straightening up with renewed purpose, we should probably get started. The universe isn't going to explore itself. The Guardian rose, its armor catching the last rays of sunlight. Together, they turned toward the research center, where the next chapter of their journey would begin. Behind them, Kepler 742's twin moons rose over the horizon, illuminating a landscape no longer barren, but full of possibility. In the distance, the ancient chamber still hummed with power, its energies now focused on healing rather than defense, and somewhere in the vast expanse of space, other guardians waited, protecting other mysteries, other chances for understanding. But here, on this once desolate world, something unprecedented had taken root, a partnership between species that promised to change the course of both organic and synthetic evolution. It hadn't begun with grand plans or mighty armies, but with a simple choice to show compassion in the face of the unknown. As they walked together toward their next adventure, Kira remembered the words she had spoken to the Guardian during their first meeting. We'll figure this out together. She hadn't known then just how prophetic those words would prove to be. The Guardian's response echoed in her mind, carrying with it the wisdom of eons. Every great journey begins with trust, and every new dawn brings the chance to understand more than we did before. That is the true legacy my creators hope to share, not the power to conquer the unknown, but the courage to embrace it. Above them, the stars continued their eternal dance, waiting to share their secrets with those brave enough to seek them, wise enough to learn from them, and compassionate enough to protect them. The end.